The Unspoken Bond, a journey of healing after heartbreak. It was one of those days when everything felt like it was slipping away. The weather was gloomy, a reflection of the emotional state of the two people standing in the corner of the cafe. Ella stared out the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass, as if hoping that time would hurry up and erase the past. But the past had a way of lingering, of clinging to the soul like a shadow, and for her, that shadow was heavier than it had ever been. She had always believed in the magic of love. When she was younger, she would dream of meeting someone who would change her world, someone who would make everything else fade into the background. But now, standing here, looking at the person who once made her heart race, she couldn't help but wonder if those dreams had been naive, if they had been just that, dreams. Liam, on the other hand, had always been the one who held her together, the one who made her laugh when she felt like crying. They were a perfect match, at least in the beginning. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a rhythm that seemed to flow without effort. But somewhere along the way, that rhythm had changed. They had stopped dancing in sync, and now it felt like they were two people walking on different paths, only pretending to walk together. Liam, do you ever wonder how we ended up here? Ella's voice broke the silence, her words soft but heavy with meaning. She didn't need to explain what here meant. He understood. Liam shifted in his seat, his gaze falling to the table between them. He ran his fingers through his hair, a habit he had when he was deep in thought. All the time, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think about it every day, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to go back to what we were." Ella felt a lump form in her throat, a mix of sadness and frustration. She had always believed that love was enough, that if two people truly cared for each other, they could overcome anything. But here they were, sitting in this coffee shop, unable to even look at each other without feeling the weight of their broken connection. "It's not about going back," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about moving forward. But I don't know how to do that with you anymore. It feels like we're both just stuck. Like we're pretending to be happy, but we're not." Liam's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it felt like time had frozen. The years they had spent together, the memories they had built, all seemed to come rushing back in that brief moment. It was as if they were both holding on to something intangible, something that could never be reclaimed. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly, his tone regretful. I didn't know how to make things right. We were so good once, Ella. I thought we could make it through anything. But now I'm not sure what's left." Ella's heart ached as she listened to him. She knew that he hadn't meant to cause her pain. But it didn't change the fact that something was broken, and no matter how hard they tried to fix it, it seemed beyond repair. "Maybe we're just not meant to be together anymore," she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. The thought of it had been gnawing at her for weeks, but she had been too scared to say it aloud. Now that it was out in the open, it felt both liberating and terrifying at the same time. Liam's face fell, and for a moment, he looked like a man who had been struck by a blow he didn't see coming. "Is that what you really want?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Ella swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. "I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know who I am without you, but I also don't know if I can keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not." The silence between them grew heavier, and for the first time, it felt like there was a wall between them. A wall they had built without even realizing it, brick by brick, over the years. They had loved each other deeply, but sometimes love wasn't enough to hold things together when the foundation was cracked. Liam leaned back in his chair, running his hands over his face. "I don't want to lose you, Ella, but maybe we've already lost each other, Bah." The words hung in the air, a painful truth neither of them wanted to accept but both knew deep down. They had tried to hold on for so long, but it felt like they were clinging to something that was already slipping through their fingers. It was as if the love they once shared had faded into something unrecognizable, something that no longer felt like home. "I don't want to lose you either," Ella said, her voice barely above a whisper. But sometimes, the hardest thing to do is let go. They sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, neither of them knowing what to say next. The coffee cups in front of them had long gone cold, a symbol of the distance that had grown between them. Ella glanced at Liam, seeing the man she once thought she could never live without, and felt a strange sense of emptiness wash over her. The love they had once shared was still there, but it was no longer enough to fill the void that had grown between them. And in that moment, Ella realized that sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do wasn't holding on, but knowing when to let go. The days that followed that conversation were a blur. Ella couldn't tell if the rain had stopped or if the world had simply become a constant downpour. Every waking moment felt like a battle with the silence that had crept between her and Liam. They still spoke, but their conversations lacked the warmth, the easy flow of words that once felt so natural. It was as if they were both walking on eggshells, afraid that one wrong step would shatter whatever fragile remnants of their relationship still remained. Ella spent most of her time trying to fill the emptiness with distractions. She threw herself into work, into the daily routines that once gave her life structure and meaning. But no matter how many meetings she attended, or how many deadlines she met, the void left by Liam's absence in her heart never seemed to shrink. She was so used to him being there, to sharing even the most mundane details of her day with him. Now, she found herself staring at her phone, waiting for a message from him that never came. She had told herself that letting go was the right thing to do. She had told herself that it would be easier in the long run. But now, sitting in her apartment alone, with only the hum of the refrigerator to keep her company, she wasn't so sure. Every corner of the apartment reminded her of him, the couch where they had spent countless hours watching movies, the kitchen where they had shared breakfasts, and the little notes he used to leave on her pillow, reminding her how much he loved her. It had been almost a week since that conversation. Almost a week since she had said the words that would change everything. "Maybe we're just not meant to be together anymore." Those words kept echoing in her mind, over and over again, as if they were a mantra that could somehow make sense of everything. But the truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know if they were meant to be together, or if they had simply outgrown each other. All she knew was that it was easier to hide from the pain than to confront it. She tried to move on, tried to tell herself that she was fine. But there was a weight on her chest that she couldn't shake off, an emptiness that nothing seemed to fill. She wasn't sure if it was the silence between them, or the realization that she might never see him again the way she once did. But something had shifted. She felt like she was losing herself in the process. Meanwhile, Liam was trying, in his own way, to come to terms with everything that had happened. He spent his days wandering through the city, trying to outrun the memories that seemed to follow him wherever he went. He didn't want to be the one to let go. He didn't want to be the one to admit that they were over. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe Ella was right. Maybe they had already lost each other, and neither of them knew how to find their way back. He couldn't stop thinking about the things she had said. "It feels like we're pretending to be happy, but we're not." Those words struck him like a knife. He had been pretending, hadn't he? Pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. Pretending that the cracks in their relationship could be ignored, that they could just continue on like nothing had changed. But change had come whether he wanted to accept it or not. Liam spent most of his nights awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He thought about the future, about what his life would look like without Ella in it. He had always imagined growing old with her, building a life together, sharing dreams and fears. But now, those dreams felt like distant memories, something that belonged to a different time, a different version of himself. As the days passed, the weight of the silence between them grew heavier. They had both avoided talking about what came next, hoping that the other would make the first move. But neither of them knew how to take the next step, or if they even wanted to. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Ella sat at her kitchen table, nursing a glass of wine, when she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat, and she found herself hoping, for a fleeting moment, that it was Liam. But when she opened the door, she was met with an unexpected sight. There stood Claire, her best friend, holding a bag of takeout and a wide grin on her face. "Come on, you need to eat something," Claire said, stepping past Ella and into the apartment. "I can see that you've been living off of wine and stress for the past week. That's not healthy." Ella chuckled softly, grateful for the distraction. "Oh, I haven't been that bad," she replied, though deep down, she knew it was probably true. She had barely eaten since her conversation with Liam. The thought of food just didn't seem to matter. Claire set the takeout on the counter and turned to face her. "How are you really doing, though?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing. Ella took a deep breath and sat down at the table. She had been avoiding this conversation, not wanting to admit to anyone, not even herself, how much it hurt. But Claire wasn't going to let her off the hook so easily. "I don't know," Ella finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm okay. I don't know what to do anymore." Claire sat down across from her and placed a hand on her arm. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," she said softly. "But you do need to take care of yourself. You're not alone in this, Ella. You have me." Ella looked at her friend, her eyes filled with tears. "I miss him," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I miss everything we had, even if it wasn't perfect. I don't know how to move on. I don't know how to let go." Claire squeezed her arm. "You don't have to let go right away. Just take it one day at a time. You'll find your way, and whatever happens with Liam, you'll be okay. You always are." But as much as Ella appreciated her friend's words, she knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The road to healing, if it was even possible, was long and uncertain. And in the quiet moments, when the world outside seemed to disappear, she couldn't help but wonder if she had already lost the person she loved most. And if she could ever find herself again. The question that lingered in her mind was not whether she could forgive Liam, or whether their relationship could be repaired. It was whether she could forgive herself for the mistakes she had made, for the way she had allowed herself to get lost in someone else's world, to the point where she no longer recognized herself. The truth was, Ella didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in a long time, she realized that it was okay not to have them. The journey of letting go, of moving forward, would be painful. But perhaps in time, it would lead her to a place where she could be whole again, with or without Liam by her side. Ella woke up early the next morning, her eyes heavy from a restless night's sleep. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. She had spent the past week in a haze, trying to distract herself from the ache in her chest. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something she didn't know how to live without. As the soft light from the window illuminated the room, Ella found herself staring at the empty space beside her bed. Liam's absence felt like a physical ash, an unshakable presence that haunted every part of her life. She had tried to convince herself that letting go was the right thing to do, but now, it felt like she was adrift, without direction or purpose. The thought of him still lingered in her mind. She remembered the way he used to wake her up with a kiss on her forehead, how he would hold her close in the mornings before the world intruded on their little bubble of happiness. It seemed like so long ago now, and the gap between then and now felt impossibly wide. As Ella slowly pulled herself out of bed, she went through the motions of her morning routine. It wasn't that she didn't want to feel better. She did. but every attempt at normalcy felt like a futile act. The effort to hold on to something that no longer existed weighed her down. She remembered Claire's words from the night before, and though she appreciated her friend's support, it didn't make her feel any less lost. "You'll find your way," Claire had said. But how? How was she supposed to find her way without knowing where she was headed? It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, unable to see what was below, yet knowing that jumping off was the only way forward. Later that morning, as she sipped her coffee at the kitchen table, her phone buzzed on the counter. Ella's heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the screen. Liam. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of whether or not she should answer. She had been avoiding him. She thought it was for the best. But now, with his name flashing on her screen, the temptation to hear his voice was overwhelming. Taking a deep breath, Ella picked up the phone and swiped the screen to answer. "Hello?" Her voice came out softer than she intended. There was a brief pause on the other end, and then she heard his voice, rough and uncertain. "Ella?" Her heart squeezed at the sound of his name. "Liam," she replied quietly, unsure of what to say next. "Ike." He paused again, as if choosing his words carefully. "I don't know what I'm doing. I've been thinking about what you said, and I just wanted to check in. See how you're doing." Ella leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. "I've been getting by," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just trying to move forward. I don't want you to move forward if it means leaving me behind," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to lose you, Ella. Not like this." Ella closed her eyes, a wave of conflicting emotions crashing over her. She had always believed that love could fix everything, that if two people were truly meant to be, they could find a way through any challenge. But now, she wasn't so sure. What if love wasn't enough? What if their connection had already fractured beyond repair? "I don't know what to do anymore, Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I feel like we're both just stuck. Like we're holding on to something that isn't even there anymore." A long silence followed, the kind that felt like an eternity. When Liam spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "Maybe we've both been holding on to the wrong thing." Ella's breath caught in her throat. It was a truth she had been avoiding for so long. Maybe the version of their relationship they had built was no longer serving them, and clinging to it was only hurting them both. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were," Liam continued, his words slow, almost as if he was carefully choosing each one. "But I still care about you, Ella. I always will." But Ella's eyes stung with unshed tears, and she wiped them away quickly, not wanting to break down over the phone. "I care about you too, but I don't think I can keep pretending that everything's fine. That we're fine." Liam let out a shaky sigh. "Maybe we're not fine, but that doesn't mean we have to give up on each other completely. Maybe we just need to find a way to move forward. Together or apart. I don't know, but I don't want to let go without trying." Ella took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She hadn't expected this conversation to go in this direction. She had been bracing herself for a definitive answer, for something that would give her clarity. But instead, she was left with even more questions than before. "Maybe it's not about trying to go back," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe it's about finding a new way forward. One where we can still care about each other, but not be tied down by the past." Liam was silent for a moment, and then he sighed, sounding defeated. "I don't know what that would look like, Ella. I don't know what's next for us. But I don't want to lose you completely. Not yet." Ella sat in silence for a moment, processing his words. She didn't know what was next either, but part of her knew that they couldn't keep going in circles, pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. They both needed space to figure things out. "I think we both need time," Ella said finally, her voice soft but firm. "Time to figure out what we really want, what we need." Liam didn't answer right away, but when he did, There was a sense of understanding in his voice. I agree. We need to figure out who we are, both separately and together. Ella nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I think it's time for both of us to take a step back, to really look at what's important. The words felt like a finality, like a door closing. And yet, Ella didn't feel the crushing weight of loss that she had expected. Instead, she felt a strange sense of relief, as if, by acknowledging the distance between them, she was giving herself permission to heal. "I'll give you the space you need," Liam said softly. "And I'll be here when you're ready." "Whenever that is?" Ella took a deep breath, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. "Thank you, Liam. I need this time to think." "We both do." They both fell silent for a moment, and then Liam spoke one last time. "I'm sorry for everything, Ella." "I truly am." Ella's heart ached, but she knew that sometimes saying sorry wasn't enough. It wasn't about the apologies. It was about finding peace within themselves, with or without each other. "I know, Liam. I know." With that, the line went quiet, and the call ended. Ella sat in her kitchen, the weight of the conversation still pressing on her chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she had a little more clarity, even though the path ahead was still uncertain. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had to find her own way, one step at a time. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Or maybe, this was the moment when they would truly let go. Either way, Ella knew she had to let herself breathe, to let herself heal. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally moving forward, even if the road was still unclear. The following weeks passed in a blur for Ella. After the conversation with Liam, everything seemed to slow down, the world around her moving in a way she couldn't keep up with. She'd spent the first few days after their call in a state of numbness, not quite sure what to do with herself. She'd walked around the apartment, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, trying to occupy her mind with small tasks so she wouldn't have to face the truth that hung heavy in the air. She'd kept herself busy, but it wasn't working. The feeling of emptiness remained, gnawing at her just beneath the surface. She thought she would feel better after a few days of space, but the silence between her and Liam had only highlighted how far apart they had really grown. The space wasn't a cure, it was just a reminder of how much they had lost. At work, Ella tried her best to appear as though she had everything under control. Her colleagues hadn't noticed the subtle shift in her mood, but that didn't make it any easier. Her mind was never fully present in the meetings or the projects she was working on. Thoughts of Liam kept creeping in, making it hard for her to focus. It was late one evening, as she sat in front of her computer, staring at the same email for the third time, when her phone buzzed on the desk. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she looked at the screen, she saw a message from Claire. "Hey, you good? You know you can talk to me anytime, right? Just checking in." Ella stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. "I'm not sure if I'm okay. I thought I would be by now, but I'm not. Everything feels off." A moment later, Claire's reply came in. "I get it, but you don't have to figure it out all at once. Take it slow, and remember you're not alone in this." Ella read the message and smiled faintly. Claire had always known how to make her feel seen, without pushing her. But still, the weight of everything that had happened with Liam lingered like a shadow, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake it. The days turned into weeks, and though Ella was trying to move forward, it still felt like she was stuck. She had tried going out with friends, taking long walks in the park, and even starting a new book, something to distract her from the heaviness in her heart. But nothing helped. The space between her and Liam felt like an insurmountable divide. Then one afternoon, as Ella was leaving work, she ran into someone unexpectedly. She was hurrying to catch the subway when she collided with a familiar figure, knocking her bag to the ground. "Sorry," she exclaimed, looking up to see who she had bumped into. And then, to her surprise, she found herself face to face with Liam. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ella's heart raced in her chest, the sight of him almost overwhelming. He looked different somehow, more worn out, like he hadn't been sleeping either. But despite the distance that had grown between them, seeing him again brought a flood of memories crashing into her mind. "You okay?" Liam asked softly, his voice tinged with concern. Ella bent down to pick up her bag, trying to steady her shaking hands. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just wasn't paying attention." Liam seemed to hesitate for a moment before speaking again. "I wasn't either." His words hung in the air, and it felt like the world around them had disappeared, leaving only the two of them standing there in that fleeting moment. "I didn't expect to see you today," Ella said, forcing a small smile. "Wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again." Liam nodded, his expression a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I've been meaning to reach out, but I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to push you." Ella looked at him, unsure of what to say. She wanted to be angry, to yell at him for all the pain he had caused her. But the truth was, she didn't have the energy for anger anymore. She was tired of fighting. "Oh, you don't have to apologize," Ella said quietly. "I think we both know things haven't been easy. But I've been trying to figure out where to go from here. I thought I had it all figured out, but I don't." Liam's gaze softened. "I don't think either of us has it figured out. But that's okay. I wanted to see you, Ella. I miss you." Those words hit her harder than she had expected. She missed him too, more than she cared to admit. But it wasn't just about missing him. It was about everything they had lost, everything they had failed to save. And no matter how much she wanted to fall back into his arms, she couldn't ignore the fact that they had both changed. "I miss you too," she whispered, the words almost too difficult to say aloud. "But I don't know if we can go back to what we were. I don't know if that's even possible anymore." Liam's face fell, and for a moment, he looked like the boy she had fallen in love with, the one who was so full of hope and dreams. But he was also a man who had made mistakes, and so had she. "I know," Liam said quietly. "I've been thinking about that a lot. Maybe it's not about going back. Maybe it's about figuring out who we are now. And if that means moving on, then maybe that's what we need to do." Ella felt a lump form in her throat. She had been waiting for this conversation, but hearing the words from him still felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but maybe it was the truth. "We can't keep holding on to the past," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to let go. But it doesn't mean I won't always care about you." Liam nodded, his expression pained but accepting. "I'll always care about you too, Ella. And I want you to be happy, even if that's without me." Ella took a step back, her heart heavy with the weight of everything they had been through. She realized then that the hardest part wasn't letting go of him. It was letting go of the idea of what they had been. The idea of a perfect love, a love that could withstand anything. But that wasn't their reality anymore. "I don't know what happens next," Ella said, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. "But I think it's time we both figure out who we are without each other." Liam reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before resting gently on her arm. "Take care of yourself, Ella. You deserve it." With those final words, Liam turned and walked away, leaving Ella standing there in the middle of the bustling city. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would ever find the kind of love she had once shared with him. But one thing was certain. She had taken the first step toward healing, toward finding herself again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Ella felt like she was finally starting to breathe again. It had been a few months since Ella had last seen Liam. The time since their brief, but significant, encounter had been a whirlwind of emotions, decisions, and moments of self-reflection. Life had continued its course, and while the pain of their separation had not entirely vanished, it had become bearable. Ella had learned to find peace within herself, even though the thought of Liam still lingered in the back of her mind. She spent more time with friends, especially Claire, who had become her pillar of support. The days of sitting alone in the apartment, staring at the walls, were behind her. She was slowly rediscovering the parts of herself she had forgotten during the years spent immersed in a relationship that had once felt like everything. Slowly but surely, Ella was building her life again, this time on her own terms. She had taken up new hobbies, things that had always interested her but had been pushed aside when she was too focused on making the relationship work. She started painting, something she hadn't done since college, and every brush stroke was like a release, a way for her to express the emotions she had kept bottled up. She also joined a local yoga class, the slow, mindful movements grounding her in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about healing, it was about rediscovering the woman she had been before Liam had become her world. Yet, despite the progress, there were moments when the silence crept in. The quietness that had followed the end of their relationship still lingered, an occasional ache that reminded her of what once was. There were still days when she missed him deeply. The way his laughter had filled the room, the way they had shared everything, from their dreams to their fears. But she understood now that some things were not meant to last forever, no matter how much she had wished they would. Ella had learned to embrace the idea that relationships, like seasons, had their time to bloom and grow, but eventually they faded, and that was okay. Life continued to move forward, and so would she. One day, as Ella sat in a cafe with Claire, enjoying a lazy Sunday afternoon, her phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out, half expecting another work-related notification. But what she saw made her pause. It was a message from Liam. The notification was simple, just a short text that made her heart skip a beat. "I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about you. I hope you're doing okay." Ella's first instinct was to ignore it. She had worked so hard to put the past behind her, and here it was, knocking on her door again. But as she stared at the message, she realized something. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't bitter. She didn't feel the need to hold on to old grudges. Instead, she felt curious. She wondered how he was, what his life was like now. She wondered if he, too, had found peace with the end of their relationship. After a moment's hesitation, she typed a reply. "I'm doing okay. I've been keeping busy, learning to enjoy the little things. It's been hard, but I think I'm finally finding my way." There was no rush to her reply. She didn't need anything from him, but there was something reassuring in knowing that he was reaching out. She wasn't sure if they were meant to be friends, or if they were even supposed to be in each other's lives at all anymore, but she didn't mind the connection they still shared. The reply came faster than she expected. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been doing a lot of thinking too. I realized that I hurt you, Ella, and I'm really sorry for that." Ella read the words, feeling a wave of emotion rise within her. She had been waiting for this moment for so long, yet now that it was here, she didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to tell him it was okay, that she had forgiven him. But another part of her, the part that had moved on, reminded her that healing was a personal journey, one that didn't require validation from anyone else. "Thank you," she replied, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. "I appreciate that. But I think we both know that sometimes the things we want most aren't always the things we're meant to have. I've learned that the hard way." She paused, staring at the screen before adding, "I'm not angry anymore, Liam. I think I've finally come to terms with everything." The phone buzzed again almost immediately. "I understand. I don't want to disrupt your peace. I wanted you to know that I still care about you. Always will." Ella felt a pang in her chest as she read his words. She had been so focused on her own journey of healing, so dedicated to finding peace without him, that she hadn't expected to be reminded of the depth of their connection. For so long, it had felt like everything between them had dissolved into dust. But in that moment, she understood that some things never fully disappear. "I care about you too," she typed. "But I think it's time for us to let go. Not because I don't care, but because we've both changed. And we deserve to find happiness, whatever that looks like." There was a long pause after that, and for a moment, Ella thought perhaps the conversation was over. But then, a final message came through. "I agree. Thank you, Ella, for everything. I hope you find everything you're looking for. I'll always be cheering for you." Ella sat back in her chair, staring at the screen, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She didn't know what the future held for her and Liam. She didn't know if they would ever truly find their way back to each other as friends, or if this was the last time they would ever communicate. But in that moment, she realized that sometimes the hardest part of healing wasn't letting go. It was knowing when to. She placed the phone down on the table, looking out the window at the setting sun. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long while, Ella felt a sense of peace. She had lived through the storm of heartbreak and uncertainty, and now she was stepping into a new chapter, one where she could finally embrace who she was, without looking over her shoulder at what had been. As Claire spoke beside her, Ella smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment, the comfort of the present, and the promise of what was yet to come. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she was ready to face it head-on. And maybe, just maybe, she would find that the future could hold a happiness that didn't require the past to be perfect. Ella sat quietly in her apartment, her fingers gently tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft, golden rays across the room. Everything felt different now. The air, the light, even the silence. It was as if the weight of the past had finally lifted, allowing her to breathe in a way she hadn't been able to for months. For the first time in a long time, Ella felt at peace. And it wasn't just the absence of Liam that had brought her this tranquility. It was the quiet understanding she had come to with herself. She had spent so long defining her life by the relationship she had shared with him that it had taken her time to realize that her worth didn't come from anyone else. The phone buzzed on the table in front of her, breaking the stillness of the room. She glanced at the screen, not expecting anything important, but her heart skipped when she saw the name on the notification. It was Liam again. It had been weeks since their last conversation, the one where they had both agreed that their time together had ended. But unlike before, this message didn't cause the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. She wasn't sure what to expect from it, but she had already come to terms with the fact that no matter what happened, she had made peace with the past. She picked up the phone and read the message. "Hey Ella, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to thank you again for everything. I've been doing a lot of thinking. And I wanted to let you know that I'm really proud of how far you've come. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Ella's heart fluttered unexpectedly, and a bittersweet smile crept onto her face. She hadn't expected such warmth, not after everything that had happened between them. It was the kind of message that felt like a gift, an acknowledgement that they had both moved on, but with no ill will between them. She took a deep breath, feeling a surge of gratitude for the journey they had shared and for the lessons it had taught her. She sat with the message for a moment, reflecting on all that had transpired. She had spent so much of her time focusing on the pain of losing someone she had loved, but now, in this space of reflection, she could see the beauty in the experience. Yes, there had been heartbreak, confusion, and loss, but there had also been love, growth, and moments of true connection. That was what she chose to remember now. Ella began typing her reply, her fingers moving with purpose. "Thank you, Liam. Your words mean a lot to me. I'm doing well. It's been a journey, but I've come to realize that letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting it. It means learning from it and moving forward. I'll always carry the good memories with me." She hit send, feeling a sense of finality. She wasn't holding on to the past anymore. She wasn't waiting for closure that would never come. This was her closure. And she had finally given it to herself. As she set the phone down and took another sip of her coffee, Ella reflected on the path that had led her here. She had learned so much about herself in the months since she and Liam had parted ways. She had learned that it was okay to feel lost sometimes, that healing wasn't linear, and that it was perfectly fine to embrace the uncertainty of the future. It wasn't about having all the answers, it was about finding the courage to keep moving forward, even when the way ahead wasn't clear. She had been afraid of this moment, the moment when she would have to let go of the person she had thought would be with her forever. But what she had discovered was that letting go didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean erasing the love, the laughter, or the connection they had shared. It meant giving herself permission to move forward, to build a future without being anchored by the past. And that was exactly what she was doing. Her life was no longer about what had been, but what could be. The thought of love no longer filled her with fear or hesitation. She had loved deeply, and she had lost. But she also knew now that there was so much more to life than a single relationship. Love wasn't a destination. It was a journey, a process of growth and self-discovery. It was about finding joy in the little things, in the quiet moments that made up the fabric of everyday life. Ella stood up from the table and walked to the window, gazing out at the city below. The streets were busy, but it was peaceful up here in her own little corner of the world. She had spent too much time waiting for the world to slow down, for someone else to come and fix what had felt broken inside of her. But now, she realized, she was the one who had to fix it. She was the one who had to heal. It wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect. But as she stood there, looking out at the future, Ella felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next. Ready to open herself to new possibilities, new experiences, and yes, maybe even new love. But this time, it wouldn't be because she needed it to complete her. It would be because she wanted it. She had already completed herself. For the first time in a long time, Ella was free. As she turned away from the window, her phone buzzed again. She checked the screen to see a notification from Claire, her best friend, asking if she wanted to grab dinner later. Ella smiled and typed back immediately. "I'd love that. I've missed you." It wasn't just Liam she had learned to let go of. It was also the fear that her life would never be the same again. The truth was, it had already changed, but it was changing for the better. She was no longer living in the shadow of what could have been. She was living in the light of what was yet to come. And with that thought, Ella felt the final piece of her heart click into place. She was finally, truly ready to move forward. As she got dressed and prepared to meet Claire, Ella realized that sometimes the most important relationships you have are the ones you have with yourself. And she was learning, day by day, that she was enough. No, she was more than enough. She was whole. And that was all she needed. For the first time in months, as she walked out the door and into the bright, sunny day, Ella felt a sense of hope, a quiet, unshakable hope that whatever happened next, she would be okay. Better than okay, she would thrive. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.